Welcome to It Starts With You, where we cut through the noise and get real about the behaviours that shape our lives, both personally and professionally. I'm Vic O'Farrell. Let's jump in because behaviours start with you. So, welcome to what will now be the last episode of 2025 of It Starts With You. Hence, and it's Christmas time, so me and Ed have put Christmas jumpers on. So, for those of you that don't celebrate Christmas, sorry, I've just in the festive mood. Um, yeah, like I said, this will be the last one going out 2025. Then we will have a break and be back at the beginning of January. I am joined by the lovely Ed. Wonderful to have you here. And rather than me introduce yourself, do you want to let the listeners and the viewers know who you are and what it is you do in the world?
Thank you so much, Vicky. Well, my name is Ed Jordan, and I'm a professional speaker, a musician, an executive coach and trainer. And I spent the first 25 years of my career as a singer, songwriter, recording artist, music producer, theatre producer, TV and radio presenter, and film composer in South Africa. And then I joined the biggest bank in Africa for the next 7 years as global head wealth experience. And while I was there, I trained as a business coach. And so nowadays, I'm based in the UK and I run a professional training and coaching business and speak professionally. And yeah, that's my news. I combine my experience in the performing arts with my knowledge of how corporate systems work. And I think that gives me a unique approach. So that's me in a nutshell, Vic.
Wonderful to have you here. Now, you've had some amazing experiences in your life, and we'll uncover those as we go through this podcast. But one of the things that when I first met you through the Professional Speaking Association, which is where I've met many of the speakers that have been on this podcast, you have to be, Ed, one of the happiest, most jolliest chaps that I know. And so I want to ask you, so in terms of personalities, I know you're very much like me, you're outgoing, peoply focused, very yellow. But what is your philosophy for life to keep you so happy and so positive?
I've given this loads of thought because it's a question that does come up quite often, I suppose, in the world we live in today, where people are faced with all sorts of challenges and stresses and battle with anxiety and overwhelm, for example. And I think from a very young age, so let's go sort of from my teen years or whatever, it was always a question that was fired away. People said, why are you so happy? Or uh, where does all this abundance of joy come from? So if I really go back to being a little boy in church in the choirs, I sang at weddings on Saturdays, and I think I got paid handsomely for such, enough for sort of sweets and tuck. And I sang at the services on Sundays, but I also sang at all the funerals. So from age probably about when you're a soprano, sort of 8, 9, 10, and then you start hitting all the solos you can imagine in church at about sort of 11, 12 before your voice breaks. I would sing at all the funerals at the school that I was at that used our chapel, and then of course at the local church on the Sundays. And so I don't know, I think sort of seeing coffins of grown-ups and then sometimes of families and of children sort of, I think it gave me a different approach to life perhaps that other people had, because when I think about life being finite and our mortality, that really there isn't a second to lose. And so I really do tend to see everything as a real blessing and life as a gift, no matter what comes my way. And just like everybody that's listening and watching today on the call, I've had my highs and lows and ups and downs, and sometimes concurrently, exactly at the same time, managing horrible things while you're putting on a brave face for the rest of the world and going through career successes. So I've had the whole spectrum, and I'm sure there's more to come. I think that's what building resilience is all about. But I think that I've always thought that must have something to do with it. Because when people do get into, and I mean, depression is something that I love speaking about as well. It's I think something many people have to navigate and cope with. So again, that's something that doesn't really make any sense sometimes, especially sort of bipolar disorders, all that kind of stuff. I find myself sometimes thinking, don't you get it? can't you see how magnificent this is right now? To be standing in Kent, in a little study, speaking to a new friend who I connected with recently, but who I feel is an old soul that I've known for years, chatting about our favorite subject, which is people, uplifting people, inspiring people, navigating different personality types, trying to be a better version of yourself, all the things that inspire and I love. In this exact moment right now, it's just so incredible, this miracle of life. And that's before you got me started on music and theater and all the things that I'm really passionate about, which again, when those sorts of moments, the communal aspect of music and theater, the sort of shared joy and shared experience, is so much to live for. So I think it speaks to purpose as well, Vic, where you think, why am I here? I think I've also thought about that quite a bit. And I think I'm here to shine my light brightly so that other people can perhaps feel a little bit better, a little bit inspired, a little bit more confident that they can sort of embrace the day, perhaps because I've made them laugh or smile or given them a hug or just being myself. So I think that's where it comes from. I do love life, and I do love people, and I do love the arts, but I get it. I get how very, very lucky I am, and so I think that's what I think it's where it comes from.
Well, so when people say to me, "Oh, you're lucky," I'm like, I'm not lucky. I've worked hard. I'm where I am because of the choices that I've made. So, I wouldn't say you're lucky. You're just one of life's blessings that, like you say, is just every time I've met you, and we have only met this year to 2025, you've always had a smile. You've always had some positive, but I've seen you slightly nervous as well when the competition time, and we've had calls, and we so as much as people who know you, and you're very outgoing, that you can actually be reserved, and you can be quieter, and you can inwardly focus when you need to.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I'm sure you're more of an expert at this than I am, Vicky, because I think I could be described. I think there's a personality type or case of an extrovert introvert. So, for example, when I met you for the very first time, I think it wasn't the PSA, obviously, but I brought my full self to that day.
Yes,
but
you did.
On the train on the way in, I wasn't bringing my full self to the train. I was sitting very quietly and getting into a space and into a zone. And in fact, that the preparation for that day, which I think was the London Heat for a speaking competition that I'd entered, I would have got up very early and would have had very focused and considered quiet time to get myself into a space where I could feel confident. And so to your point about the work that goes into bringing your best self to things, there is a behind the scenes piece to me as well. I mean, quite often my people will say I'll be at a social engagement or a function or family function, whatever the case may be, and new friends might look at my wife and go, "Good heavens, is he always like this?" And it's such a stupid question because, or maybe it's not a stupid question. It's a funny thing to say because of course not. There has to be a sort of decompression after each performance or after each talk. I'm sure you're the same, Vic, when it comes to I find a killer, I don't know whether you agree or not, is the 1-day workshop or a half-day workshop where you really give your all. I find that particularly draining because there's a lot of talking normally with the client afterwards, but then that night is a really good night's sleep. I find that taking the energy of everybody on in the room can really suck it out of one. But of course, you don't want the people that are employing you to know that. So one keeps a brave face on and goes for it. But I do, just back to the sort of introvert extrovert thing, I think if someone asked me where my power and strength came from, I would answer that it comes from stillness. A very crafted time in the morning to be very, very quiet and then work out what needs to be done and take it from there. And that's a practice I've done for 10 years now, which seems to stand me in good stead.
No, I agree with you. If I'm out delivering, a client's workshop, absolutely. I get to the end of the day and I will decompress on the train home. It's always that time, isn't it, when somebody gets on the train that you know, and you go, oh, it's a half an hour conversation I'm going to have now. And it's just like, well, I can bring it, I can do it. And you're absolutely right. Some people will say to my husband, oh my God, is she always like that? I'm like, no, I'm not always like this. That I do have downtimes. Generally in the evening, because I'm a morning person. I'm like Tigger in the morning, which my husband does find very annoying, which I know. I'm very aware of it, so I bring myself down again. Um, but let's talk about, you made a huge step, didn't you, by relocating not just yourself, but your wife and your two children from South Africa to here in England. And as you've said, you're in Kent. That's a big decision to make. And so there's some lots of behaviours that are going to go on there, making the decision. And how did that unfold for you?
Okay, well, my wife and I, obviously, we're both South Africans and we've lived there all our lives. But many of our friends and school friends, for example, as we had children and started meeting the parents of our kids at school, they'd all had adventures, Vic. They'd all lived in Japan for a bit, or they'd lived in France for a bit, or in the UK for 10 years, and then they came back to South Africa. And my wife and I had never done that. We traveled everywhere. That's I suppose, one of our common passions. And we love traveling, the two of us, and we had kids. We've taught our kids that opening up your mind to the rest of the world is so important. Different cultures, different foods, different ways of seeing. But we never lived anywhere. And we were secretly envious of all the friends who'd had these sort of adventures all over the world. So we started discussing it with our kids and saying, come on, if something comes up or we can make something happen for ourselves, let's go for it. And so in last 2024, in May, we arrived in England starting from scratch all over again. And I think that's where my experience in financial services and learning about change management really came into place. So came into play. I sat down with my children and I said, all change is hard at the beginning. It's messy in the middle and it's gorgeous in the end. And Vicky, it was just like that. The hard part was saying goodbye to grannies and aunts, and my wife's sister just had a baby, so it was just too terrible. She was pregnant, about to have a baby. It was just so it was really horrible saying goodbye to grannies and dear friends. And then the messy part was, of course, good heavens, Waterloo East is different from Waterloo. We didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know how long it took to get everywhere. So I always overcated and arrived everywhere 2 hours early. It was a horrible sort of uneasy feeling for about a year of sort of messy and finding our way around, getting settled into schools. But now, I've met so many new friends just by being authentic and honest and asking for help. And everyone I've asked for help has come back and said, absolutely no problem. And let's show you the way here, and yourself included in that, Vicky. It's been incredible as I build a new network. But and now we're hitting the gorgeous phase. So I think that change management thing was and I keep saying to the children, we didn't come here for the weather. So we put on our jerseys and off we go. We're loving it. We're loving it.
Let's hit pause so I can tell you how I work with leaders and teams to turn behaviour into results. Have you got a panel session coming up? Panel guests should do more than just fill the time. They should spark change. I bring fresh, practical insights that challenge thinking and inspire action. It starts with you, and together we'll make it happen. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You don't come to England for the weather. As you know, and for the listeners and viewers, I have actually no, I don't have family anymore in South Africa, but I had family in South Africa. They're now back. Actually, they're here. But I know the weather out there is beautiful. It's a beautiful country, actually. So if you haven't been, people, please. But I love the fact that you say, open your mind and go and see different cultures and eat different foods. And it's one of the things that my husband and I have when we're abroad. I don't want to go and find the Red Lion and have an English breakfast. I don't. That's not the point for me for being abroad. We went to Kerala a few years before lockdown. We went to Kerala that New Year, the 2019 to 2020. Oh, and it was just stunning. And I remember being on the backwaters on one of the rice boats. We were on that for an overnight trip, and they were bringing the food out, and they were like, how spicy? You want spicy? And I'm like, I'm not a spicy person. I don't like hot chili stuff. But actually, what I did love in Kerala was the amount of food that didn't have meat in it. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian, but actually, you just eat. The taste is in the spices. And I remember my husband going, no, 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 I want spicy. And he was like, are you sure you want spicy? And Mum was like, oh yeah, no, I like spicy. I think English spicy curry versus Indian spicy curry, different levels,
Different
like
levels. Yeah.
really different levels. He didn't ask for things spicy again. But where would you say is the most fascinating place then that you have visited in the world?
That's a good question. The first thing that popped into my head was Taiwan. I don't know why that is. I really don't know why that is. As a young musician, I got my music released completely by accident in Taiwan. And I got a call in Johannesburg, where obviously my home was, saying, would I come across, please, and tour Taiwan as a 23-year-old young musician? And they'd sort the pianos out for me. And I had an Australian manager, and off we went. And I'd never been to the East before. So would I have landed in Hong Kong? Probably, and then got across to Taiwan. But I found that so otherworldly. This must have been in the 90s. I'd never seen anything like it before. And there's I think a famous alley one goes on called Snake Alley in Taipei, which is aptly named because of everyone sort of eating snakes and drinking the blood and all that sort of jazz. I found that particularly upsetting. I think with the way that animals are treated and stuff. I wasn't expecting that. That sort of threw me a bit of a curveball. But I didn't love it because it was so divorced from anything that I'd ever experienced before. So those sorts of experiences, I think, fascinating was your question. So what's the most fascinating? That was the most fascinating. The time my eyes really sort of opened up to it. I'd never seen anything. It was like being on a different planet, like being in a Star Trek film.
Yeah. And I think when you do have those experiences, but like you say, as a in your 20s,
Yeah.
how wonderful to get a phone call saying, will you come and I mean, I have listened to your music, as you know, I've got some of your albums on Spotify, which is wonderful because when I first met you, I just assumed we've met in the PSA, you're a speaker. I had no idea about your life, and actually until I'd heard your keynote, and then we explored more. So you had a fascinating life in South Africa. Not saying that you're not having a fascinating life here in the UK, but you met some amazing people. How did your life evolve over there? You started in the choir, like you say, and then being a singer. How did it evolve into what it was?
Yeah, well, I was very, again, lucky. I mean, I do consider myself very lucky and very blessed. And as a young man, I met Archbishop Desmond Tutu when I was singing in the choir at school. And there's a hymn called Nkosi Sikeleli Africa, which means God bless Africa, which was banned because it was affiliated to the African National Congress. So you weren't allowed to sing it in South Africa. And so at our school, we had progressive teachers, most of whom came from the UK, and they said, "No, we're going to sing this." So I sang it for Archbishop Desmond Tutu. He came to our school. This upset half of the parents, who are perhaps a little bit more conservative and not as progressive, and then the other half were very enthused to have him there, as was I. And so I sang the hymn, and afterwards he gave me a big hug. And I was away from home, and I missed my mom and dad. I just remember this short man with this incredible skill when it comes to invigorating a congregation. He was a fantastic preacher, as you can imagine. And I saw him the next year. I sang the same hymn again, gave me another hug. He said, "What is feeding you?" Gave me a big hug again, and the year after year. And our paths crossed as I went throughout my career. So that was he's an instrumental figure in my life and had an effect on me because of the way that he led. So as a young boy, watching a black archbishop, as a young white South African kid, speak about his vision for the end of apartheid and how the world should be, was incredibly transformational and inspirational for me. And so that lit something inside me. And later in my life, because of being on television and radio and being invited to all sorts of events, I met Nelson Mandela at the opening of a film called Sarafina, which is a famous South African musical. And then Later, I performed for King Charles and Nelson Mandela at the Prince's Trust concert in Johannesburg. So I was afforded all these opportunities to share my art and to get up and share my songs in front of thousands of people, and in this case, tens of thousands of people for the Mandela Prince Charles concert. So very, very lucky along the path. It's sort of more structured answer would be: I finished school, I went to drama school. And this was during the years of apartheid. So Nelson Mandela was still in prison on Robben Island, and we were at university. And the art that was being made at a progressive university I was at, called Wits University, was all anti-apartheid struggle art. And I was very lucky to be in an environment with very bright academics who were challenging the status quo with their writing, the plays they wrote, the music they wrote. So that again inspired me to become the person that I was. So a very sort of right time, right place story throughout my career. Yeah.
But also looking at things with a positive lens. Looking at the change, looking at what the future, being inspired by someone like Desmond Tutu, who saw the world differently to the world that he was living in at the time, and the fact that you're absolutely right. So can you remember where you were when um how have I just lost his name?
Nelson Mandela was released.
Yeah, how did I just lose his name
No,
there?
no, 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 no. We're in it. No, we're in it.
Menopause brain.
No, it's a lot going on because as you said that, I could remember exactly. I knew you were going to ask that. You just went, can you remember where you were? And I was immediately transported back to exactly where I was. So I was at Wits University in a building called Lawson's Building. And I was very privileged to be taught by a lecturer called Malcolm Perky, who is a famous figurehead in South African theatre. And I think his most famous work is called Sapphire Town for your listeners, which he workshopped with the Junction Avenue Theatre Company. But he had a huge effect on me as well, challenging me always to write music that was out of my comfort zone. So he introduced me to Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht, which I would never have known about had it not been for him. So it was, I can't remember the day it was, but I remember the timing was sort of afternoonish. It was just the two of us left in the theater, and he said, it's going to happen. And I went, okay, and followed him to his car, and he tuned in the basement into the radio, and we listened to F.W. de Klerk's speech, where I think he said, I wish to put it plainly, I will unban the ANC unconditionally. I think I can't remember the exact language, but we sat there. I could get chills now thinking about it, because especially to be with someone like Malcolm Perky, he was a real he was part of the struggle with his art that he made for all over the world to draw attention to what was happening in South Africa. So to be sitting in a car, I think I must have been in third or fourth year, and he looked at me afterwards. We turned the radio off, and then we walked up to his study quietly, to his sort of university lecturer study, just like a Goodwill Hunting type study. And he opened the third drawer from the bottom, and he brought out a bottle of J&B whiskey and 2 coffee cups. And we both had a celebratory drink. And I've never forgotten that. I think everyone remembers exactly where they were. What an incredible. And then I think a week later, I think it must have been that he walked out from Victor Verster prison, which everyone sat transfixed watching on their television. And you could feel the earth shift in my world and in my home country's world. It's in South Africa. You could feel the earth move. And then when he passed away in 2013, it moved again. It's never quite been the same again since his passing.
Yeah. Which I don't. I'm not South African. I've been to the country, but I can only imagine it. Yeah, I'm not even going to liken it to other people in this world, but like just picking up on what you said there. When you say you're lucky, you've had a lucky path. I don't think it is, because I also like to say you've seen things through a positive lens, but it's the impact that people in your life has had on you. And I always, as you know, the open to any of my keynotes is what is it like to be on the receiving end of you. You have been on the receiving end of a lot of positive people, and that's what's impacted your life. And like you say, you were blessed to actually meet Nelson Mandela, and perform at the concert. And then, sadly, when he passed, you had the privilege of singing at his funeral,
Yeah, it was his memorial service. The
memorial
funeral
service.
I think the funeral was a 2 or 3 day affair on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was a huge event in a stadium, whereas this was the memorial service for his family and some struggle heroes and the foreign press and media. And it was led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and that was quite a thing. There were some wonderful musicians on the bill. There were about 6 of us: PJ Powers, the Soweto Gospel Choir, Johnny Clegg, Danny Kay, and a very dear friend, Yvonne Chaka Chaka, who's a huge star that I grew up with similar ages and became very close to at one time. So it was a huge privilege to be with all of them. And I went on last and sang my own composition, which is called Miss You Madiba. And that went out. But the highlight of that for me, really, apart from another huge hug from Archbishop Desmond Tutu at the end, was that my childhood hero, Peter Gabriel, was in the congregation 2 rows from the front. So you can imagine that there was a sort of full circle moment for me as a teenager listening to his wonderful music. And he always had a sort of political slant to his music, Peter Gabriel. So I loved him very much. But to have him and he gave me a huge hug afterwards as well and said, great song. So for me, that was a career-defining sort of a sealer up of a chapter moment, and just too wonderful.
Oh, and like you say again, even the fact that he'd passed, you were there to be part of it. So you take things even when they are sad things, but you put a positive spin on them, which is, like I say, it's that whole part of our life, isn't it? Where, yeah, sorry, listeners, I'm going to say the word. It happens to us, but it's how do I learn from this lesson? How do I move forward from it? And what am I going to put in place so that this doesn't happen again? As opposed to sitting there saying, "Why me?"
I think
And
is crisis. I think I've read that crisis is a Greek word that means opportunity. I think so. Inside when these things happen, there's always gaps, and as you say, if you choose to see things through a positive lens, then you can make things happen in those times of crises. Anyway, yeah.
and it is, and that's why I think, when I first met you, I was just like, wow, this is a happy chap. And ever since I have met you and spoken to you, and we've been on Zooms and other times together, I'm like, you do always look with a positive lens. And for those who are listening, going, yeah, but that's really easy for you to say, isn't it? It's like, well, no, it's a choice. We have choices. When things happen, choose how to deal with them. So, I mean, I could talk to you for hours, Ed. I absolutely could, but I'd like you to leave our listeners and viewers with just kind of one final thought on life, whether it's a piece of advice for life, or if somebody's having a rough time at the moment, something that they could do to help themselves to move forward and get into a positive space.
Okay, brilliant, Vicky. Is this going to go out before Christmas?
This is going out before Christmas.
Okay, so here we are on our Christmas jumpers, and here's my closing message for everybody. The thing is that Christmas should be the most joyous, wonderful, uplifting time. But for many, it isn't, because the family construct and dynamic quite often is complex. And so instead of really looking forward to these next couple of weeks, many people are filled with dread about how they're going to afford things, cope with things, manage personalities, etc., etc. The other side of that, of course, is the other spectrum, is that many people will sit battling loneliness as we move into the most wonderful time of the year, as the song says. So here's the practical tip for all of us listening that are in the UK with our daylight saving time. And my message is about light. And if you can manage, as I know Vicky does, to get out of your house while the sun is up, so if it's not raining too badly and there's a bit of a blue sky, get out of the house, open the curtains, get out. Because when you're managing anxiety, depression, loneliness, whatever the case may be, to be stuck in a room with a curtain shut is not helping anybody. just moving your body and some fresh air and some light. It sounds so simple and obvious, but it's a game changer. After this podcast, I'm taking the dogs outside. It's going to uplift my spirits. It's going to give me time to think about what the next step is clearly. So that's my message to everybody. I know it sounds basic, but is to acknowledge that it's not just you who might be going through any kind of challenges over Christmas. It's a common struggle that many face when it comes to managing the complexities of family sometimes over this period. And I think I wish everybody that in 2026, for everyone listening, that things fall into place for you. So it's closing for me to say, instead of going into 26 with a clenched fist, to open up your hands and embrace it. Lots and lots of love.
That's wonderful. I will add my one and only thing to that is that don't put the pressure on yourself to have everything so perfect, not just for Christmas, but just in life. If you didn't get the red candles to go on the table, doesn't matter. You know, if you didn't get whatever it is next year, if something hasn't quite fallen into place, don't beat yourself up, because everybody is in the same boat. Ed, thank you for joining me. I will make sure I've got all your contact details as always, and in the show notes, everybody, please go and find and connect with Ed. Go listen to his music. It's beautiful, really beautiful. Here's to the end of the podcast for 2025, and we will be back on Wednesday, the 7th of January, 2026. Take care. Well, that's today's dose of truth. Now go make it happen, because behaviour drives behaviour, and behaviour starts with you.